In the years following the end of the First World War, Germany's reparations became one of the biggest political and economic controversies in Europe. Newspapers, diplomats, and entire governments obsessed over one question: how much should Germany be forced to pay for the devastation of the war? The issue dominated international politics throughout the 1920s as Britain, France, and other victorious powers argued endlessly over money, responsibility, and whether Germany could ever realistically repay the enormous costs of the conflict. But Germany had not fought alone. During World War I, it had stood alongside Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, together forming what became known as the Central Powers. All four empires had lost the war. All four had suffered military defeat, economic collapse, and political chaos. Yet when the peace treaties were signed, the burden of reparations would fall overwhelmingly on just one nation. Germany was ordered to pay massive reparations for decades, while the other defeated powers either paid very little or escaped the burden almost entirely. So why did Germany become the primary target? In 1919, world leaders gathered in Paris to negotiate the peace settlements that would officially end the war. The atmosphere was tense, emotional, and filled with competing demands from the victorious Allied powers. Britain wanted stability, France wanted security and revenge, and smaller Allied nations demanded compensation for the destruction they had suffered during 4 years of brutal fighting. One of the most difficult questions was reparations. Who should pay for the ruined cities, destroyed infrastructure, and millions of lives lost during the conflict? To solve this, separate treaties were created for each defeated power. Germany received the Treaty of Versailles, while Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire each faced their own agreements. But unlike Germany, several of these empires were already collapsing from within. By the time negotiations began, Austria-Hungary had already fragmented into multiple new countries. The Treaty of Versailles placed the majority of the blame for the war onto Germany. Its leaders were forced to accept responsibility for the conflict and the enormous damage caused across Europe. Germany lost valuable territory, overseas colonies, and key industrial regions. Entire sections of the country were removed, weakening both its economy and national pride. Its military was also drastically reduced. The German army was limited in size, heavy weapons were restricted, and the country was forbidden from rebuilding a major offensive force. However, despite defeat and revolution, Germany itself still existed as a functioning state. Its government institutions remained intact, and the country still possessed a recognizable central authority. That made Germany an easy target for reparations. The Allies believed there was still a stable government capable of collecting taxes, managing payments, and accepting long-term financial responsibility. Bulgaria had joined the war in 1915, hoping to regain territory lost during earlier conflicts in the Balkans. At first, its military campaigns were surprisingly successful. Bulgarian forces expanded into neighboring territories and briefly strengthened the country's regional influence. But those gains would not last for long. By 1918, Allied offensives shattered Bulgarian resistance. Exhausted soldiers, economic collapse, and growing unrest forced the government to seek peace before the war even officially ended. Bulgaria signed an armistice and later accepted territorial losses, military restrictions, and reparations payments. But compared to Germany, the amount demanded was relatively small. The Allies understood that Bulgaria was already economically weak and politically unstable. Demanding enormous payments from such a small country simply was not realistic. Austria and Hungary presented an even bigger problem. By the end of the war, the empire had completely disintegrated into several independent nations. New states like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia emerged from the ruins, while Austria and Hungary became much smaller successor countries struggling to survive. This created a major legal and political issue. If the empire no longer existed, then who exactly was supposed to pay reparations on its behalf? Austria itself was an economic disaster. Food shortages, unemployment, inflation, and political instability pushed the country to the brink of collapse during the early 1920s. The Allies eventually realized that Austria and Hungary simply lacked the resources to make meaningful payments. In practice, reparations became little more than empty promises. The Ottoman Empire faced a similar fate. Defeat in the war triggered occupation, territorial division, and the near-total collapse of imperial authority. Britain and France divided large sections of former Ottoman territory between themselves, establishing mandates and spheres of influence across the Middle East. But Turkish nationalists under Mustafa Kemal resisted the post-war settlement and fought to create a new independent Turkish state from the empire's ruins. As the old Ottoman Empire disappeared and Turkey emerged in its place, the idea of demanding major reparations became politically unrealistic and economically pointless. And so, by the time the dust settled after World War I, Germany stood alone as the only defeated power still wealthy, organized, and stable enough to carry the burden of reparations, a burden that would shape European history for decades to come. If you like this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you. See you soon.